In this video, we are going to add a small 7-foot by 12-foot patio. This will be a covered patio to the front of our 434 square foot house. And this will involve pouring a concrete slab and removing some of the roofing and the roof sheathing. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that you might not need to remove as much of the roof sheathing as I did, and I will leave it up to you, your best judgment on what you need to remove to actually build the roof. And along with the roof sheathing, you will need to remove some of the rafter blocks. Just don't remove more than you need. For example, once you get over into this section here, you might want to leave this block and leave some of the fascia board sticking out a little longer than you think it might need to be. In other words, if you cut it over here and it needs to be about 3 inches longer, you're not going to be happy with yourself. Now we're going to use a framing square to square up the patio, and in order to do that you will simply set one side of the framing square up against the building and the other side up against your form board. And another thing that might vary in your area is this 2 inches, and that is usually going to be the minimum distance between the top of your floor or the top of the concrete foundation and the top of your patio. However, these sizes can be different, especially if you're dealing with ADA access. So once we have the form board nice and square, we can drive a couple of stakes into the ground and then grab our trusty level to level it off. And once it is level, we will be able to mark this stake over here. We're just simply going to draw a line across the top of it so that we can figure out how far to drop this end of the form board to create a 1/4 of an inch per foot slope in our form board. And since we're coming out 7 feet and 1/4 of an inch per foot is the minimum, I'm going to go ahead and drop it an extra 1/4 of an inch to create 2 inches of slope. But if you did the math, it would come out to 1 3/4 inches. And then after you have that done, you can set the rest of your form boards and dig out whatever you need for your concrete patio slab. And in our case, we're going to have a footing at each end. This is going to be 12 inches by 12 inches and then 12 inches deep. Next up, we will set our rebar, and it's going to be spaced 18 inches on center in both directions. And if you're planning on building the patio with the house, then you could always extend the rebar into the original footing and even tie it to the rebar in the original foundation. If not, you might need to drill some holes and dowel the rebar into the footing. However, this might not be necessary. You could simply install the rebar and space it 18 inches on center or 24 inches on center. And I am using number 4 rebar or 1/2 inch rebar. And we will also be installing some type of post base connectors. And you can usually find these at your local lumber yards. And they're going to basically center into our footing, and your footing sizes might need to be different also. So not too difficult. Let's go ahead and pan out. And there's our rebar. Next up, we will pour the concrete patio slab and strip the forms, of course. Take a look at our post base connector, which should be about 1/4 of an inch off the ground. I like to pour the concrete to the bottom of the metal here, but I have seen people raise them up a little bit if they need to. Now, in order to figure out the height of the posts that are going to sit in the connectors I just showed you, I think you could actually just grab a 2x4, set it on top of the patio foundation, and then go all the way up to the top of the wall, and then subtract the height of the beam from either the 2x4 or the measurement that you got. And in our scenario, we are going to be using a 4x8 beam. And my thought for something like this is the fact that we have 1/4 of an inch slope on the patio slab already. And if we want the roof to slope 1/4 of an inch per foot, then we can use this measurement right here to create 1/4 of an inch per foot slope on the bottom and the top. And you should always check the measurement. Here we have 7 foot 7 3/16, and I believe most building codes require a minimum of 6 foot 10 inches. So in reality, we have plenty of room here. If I wanted to change the pitch of the roof to a 1/2 inch per foot, all I would need to do is take 2 inches off the top of the post. If I wanted to make a 1 inch per foot slope, I would simply adjust the post accordingly, and I believe that would be 6 more inches. And that would still provide us with over 7 foot 1 inches of headroom clearance and help the water drain off of the roof a little faster. And of course, make sure that you have all of these calculations done before and not after you install your post. However, it might be better for you to put the post and beam into place if you're having a difficult time wrapping your mind around what I'm trying to do to figure out the slope of the roof rafters. The next step will be to place some type of a straight edge or your roof rafter or even a 2x4 or a 2x6 on top of the beam and on top of the framing plates to check the slope of the roof rafter. So not going to be too difficult to do. Just simply grab a level, and in this case we're using a 2 foot long level, and if we have a 1/4 of an inch per foot slope, then the distance between the bottom of the level and the top of the roof rafter should be a 1/2 of an inch. And for example, if we had a 1 foot long level, then the distance should be a 1/4 of an inch. If we had a 4 foot long level, then it should be 1 inch. And another thing I do when building patios like these to speed up the process will be to nail one of the roof rafters into place at each end and then level or vertically plumb up the posts so that they are plumb in this direction or vertically straight. And even though I showed you this method, you might be better off just simply bracing all of the posts up and plumbing up the posts in both directions by using some type of bracing like this. And then setting your straight edge or your roof rafters on top to check to see if it's got the right slope. And again, use whatever is easier for you. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the connection here, where you will need to make sure that it is lapped on the right side, or should I say the correct side of the ceiling joist, because I actually built this model and had them lapped on the wrong side. And I will show you what I'm talking about here in a few seconds. And here is another cut you might need to get creative with. You can install the patio rafter like this and then notch around it, or just have the patio rafter sitting on top 1.5 inches or 2 inches. Keep in mind that the minimum distance that a rafter can sit on top of a framing plate is probably going to be 1.5 inches. So another thing that might help you when building your patio roof. And just another view to show you that the gable studs will also help to support the rafter here if for whatever reason you believe you might have cut too much out of the rafter and it doesn't seem like a nice structural connection. Next up, we will install all of our roof rafters and our pressure blocks, and we're going to set the blocks on top of the beam, and they are going to go even or flush with the outside of the beam. And all of our roof rafters are going to be 16 inches on center, and they are not going to have any seat cuts notched into them because the slope of the roof isn't really that steep, or steep enough in my opinion to require one. But again, I will leave that up to you if that is a design modification you want to install on your project. Now let's take a look at the blocking here. And in this case, we're going to bring it out past, if you have siding or stucco, maybe it can go out past that a little bit. And this is going to help us create a nice finished edge at the bottom here. And as I mentioned earlier, when I said that you need to make sure that these joists are located on the correct side, you can see here that there's not going to be a problem with this one or this one or this one, but if this one was located on this side of the ceiling joist, the rafter would be in the way. And you could run into this same problem with roof trusses or other types of framing that might require some type of layout modifications for the location of your patio roof rafters. So for example, you might have 24-inch on center roof rafters like we have here, and 16-inch on center ceiling joists like we have here. And if for whatever reason the layout measurements for these rafters or ceiling joists change, then you might need to change the layout measurements on these also. Next up, let's go ahead and install our fascia board, and this is probably going to be about the trickiest part of this entire project. However, by providing you with a few examples of it, you should be able to figure it out. And we're simply going to set this piece of fascia board on top of the framing plate to provide it with a nice strong connection. It's sitting on something solid. I know some carpenters might want to cut it here, but that's not always going to provide us with the best structural connection. Same thing here. And depending upon how far away this is from the other rafter, you might need to run this up a little further and create some type of a cantilever. Put our blocks in there, and our blocks of course are going to line up with the blocks on this side with this roof, and the blocks over here will line up with the other side. We can see here from the bottom how they're lining up and how they are lining up on the other side. So we have a nice clean finish there. And since this is only about 8 feet, I'm not worried about putting any outlookers in here. And I've done this plenty of times where it seemed like it was nice and strong. View of the blocking and the fascia board there, using 2x8 for the fascia board. And this might be a more difficult cut for you to make, and I might even make another video on that. And if I get enough people requesting it in the comment area, I will definitely make another video on how to join these two pieces of fascia board together. And of course, the final phase for building a patio like this would be to install the roof sheathing. Except for the fact that I ran into a problem here. Now, I didn't modify this. I could have easily made this plywood bigger with my modeling program, but I didn't want to do that. All of this stuff is to scale. And when I was all done installing the plywood here, I'm almost an inch short if I line it up with the front here. However, since the fascia board is 1.5 inches thick and I'm still going to be able to get my perimeter nailing in here, I could simply move the plywood back, put a rip strip in the front, and everything should work out just fine. So this would be one way to solve this problem. Another thing you could do would be to simply grab your measuring tape and measure from here to here and see what the measurement is, because you might be able to just bring the fascia board back 1 inch or 2, whatever you need to solve that problem. And hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to go ahead and go a little faster through this section of the video because it's running a little long. So another thing you can do will be to extend the length of the patio roof rafters so that you can get more nailing into the ceiling joist or the roof trusses, whatever you're going to be nailing it into. And another method might be to extend the block here a little farther so that you can add a little more structural support to this section of the fascia board. Or you can use a wider piece of lumber and some joist hangers. And of course, this one here is definitely going to be stronger. However, it might not be aesthetically pleasing to some type of an architect or designer because you got this big chunk of wood here. So again, just something else you can do to make what would otherwise be a structurally weak part of the roof framing into something a little stronger. And we could always make this connection a little stronger by extending the beam a little further and then placing a block on top of it and then nailing the fascia board into the block. And another thing you can do would be to chamfer the edges here, and we will take a look at the other side to give you an idea of what the chamfered edges would look like if you don't like that square look. And here we've extended the beam a little further past the fascia board so that the fascia board sits on top of the beam. And that is it for the video. Let's go ahead and wrap it up by just providing you with a few more views. Give you an idea of what it looks like from underneath. A nice clean look here. And you could always use T111 plywood or 1x6 tongue and groove if you want a different look from the bottom. And I would also like to point out that if you do use 1/2 inch plywood here, expect all of your roofing nails and staples to come through the roof sheathing. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to use 3/4 inch plywood, or at the very least, while you're installing your roofing, come down down and take a look at what it looks like from the bottom after you've installed a couple of nails. And I am sure that I have plenty of more tips, but this video has ran way longer than most of my other videos, so I'm going to stop it right here. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button or leave a comment in the comment area and let us know if this video helped you in any way, shape, or form.